Howdy everybody, Joe Konkoly in the shop here at Elderly Instruments, back after a short hiatus. We've been having lots of fun and been very busy lately, but we apologize for our absence, but we're back. We're back now, and we're back just in time for our 1 year anniversary. So next week is 1 year to the day since we started in the shop, and so we're trying to cook up something fun for next week. So if you have any questions or comments or ideas, we've got a few ideas, but we're looking to get some questions and comments from our listeners out there. And one idea that we have is to do a little roundtable discussion about a couple of interesting questions. So if you have some questions, please send them in. Today, we are going to look at this fine new Kentucky KM-250 mandolin and discuss mandolin setup. And we've done guitar setup way back when, about a year ago. And so that's why we're revisiting the idea of setup, specifically with the mandolin. The mandolin setup is similar to guitar with a few little differences in that the main areas that we're looking at in setup that I view is adjusting the neck, adjusting the nut slots, and setting the string height at the bridge. Those things are pretty common on a lot of different instruments. Certainly there are some differences from mandolin to guitar. The main thing being that there are 8 strings on the mandolin, 4 courses of 2 strings each, and each of those pairs are tuned in unison. So that's the first thing I did. Pulled this baby out of the box, and actually the first thing I did was to measure the scale length for the bridge position, so I could have the bridge in right in the ballpark of where it should end up being, and then I tuned it up. The way I do that, let me grab a ruler here. I'll be back in camera here 1 second. I have this great 36-inch rule that is incremented in thousandths of an inch that I use for this. You could, of course, use any rule that would be long enough and accurate enough. I like to use something like this because it allows us to measure pretty much the whole range of instrument scale lengths that we might have. But the scale length is the distance from the front of the nut, where the front of the nut and the fingerboard meet, to the middle of the 12th fret. You double that. That is the scale length. The position of the bridge is usually that scale length plus a very small compensation for the fact that the strings sit above the fretboard a little bit, so that when you press them down to the fret, you're actually pulling on them and stretching them a little sharp. So if you set the bridge right at the scale length, when you played it, you could get it in tune on the 1st fret. When you played it on the 12th fret, it would not match the 12th fret note. So anyhow, let's just do a quick measurement here. So I'm butting the ruler right up against the front of the nut, and I am eyeballing the middle of the 12th fret, which is 6.93 inches. I usually grab my handy-dandy calculator, 6.93, and double that times 2 gives me 13.86. I know from experience that the compensation factor that I want to add for a mandolin is 0.07 plus 0.07, which is going to give me 13.93 inches. So that's where I set the high E string to measure, is 13.93 inches. I don't know if you can see that one, but and that's what I start out with. So I know that the bridge is, if not right on, at least very close. That allows me to tune the instrument up and get an idea of how it's set up at this point, and what I need to do to get it properly set up. My goal is to tune those strings up the first time, take a look at the whole setup, and then if I have to detune the strings to make some changes, I only need to do it once. That certainly makes the setup procedure go faster. Okay, so I've got the bridge set. Well, because of course on a mandolin I can move that bridge anywhere I want. It can set further closer to the neck or further away. So I have that adjustability to compensate for the height of the strings and the thickness of the strings, so it'll play in tune. So I've got that bridge set. Now and the strings tuned up. I'm gonna look at the neck adjustment. This mandolin has a truss rod, which the end of it is right underneath this cover here. And what that truss rod does, it adjusts how straight the neck is from the first fret really to the body joint, so right there. This portion from here to there is not affected by the truss rod, and really this last portion right up through here is affected very little because of the thickness of the heel. But anyhow, that's what I'm looking to measure, and I'm going to use the tuned string as a straight edge. So let's look at this. The best way to look at this is get a nice light source right behind the neck, because I'm going to be looking at this area right around the 7th fret here, which is that middle of where that truss rod works. So, and what I want to see is a small amount of space between the top of that fret and the bottom of the string. So I'm going to use one hand to press down the string here between the nut and the 1st fret, so the string is resting on that 1st fret, and I'm going to call the 14th fret the body joint on this instrument. So I'm going to press the string down with my other hand in between the 14th and the 15th fret, so the string is resting on the 14th fret and the 1st fret. And I'm going to look at that space down there between the top of the string and the 7th fret, and it's virtually zero. The string is actually resting on that fret. I'm going to do that same look on each string because I want to see that the neck is reacting evenly across its width. There's a teeny little space there on the next fret, resting there. It's pretty much resting the whole way across, so I know that the neck is a little too straight, because what I want is around 5 thousandths gap right there at the 7th fret. So I want to see a very slight curve of the neck between the 1st fret and the 14th fret. And so I know that this neck is too straight, so I'm going to take a screwdriver here and remove the truss rod cover. Most mandolins have the neck adjustment at the peg head end, as opposed to a lot of guitars that have it at the sound hole end. So I take these little screws out, set them aside, get the truss rod cover out of the way, and you can see there is a nut right at the end of the rod there, and there's a cavity surrounding that nut, which will allow me to get a wrench on. This is a pretty typical truss rod adjustment end. You need a socket to go on the end there. Okay, so the first thing I notice, I have a straight socket here that I know fits it. It's the right size. It is a, what is it? I think it's a 3. I should know this off the top of my head, but yeah, it's a, it's 5/16. But because the way the truss rod cavity is cut on this, I can't really get it on there straight. It's kind of, so I need an angled wrench, which I should have prepared for because I'm not sure I have the right one sitting here. How about that? I thought I had my wrench sitting there all ready to go. Let me borrow one. I'll be right back. No, a socket. I have the straight socket.
For like one of these things?
No, like one of these things.
Oh.
Yeah, like one of these guys.
Oh, I see.
One of these guys.
Look and see if this is
Right.
piled by frogs.
I think I got one.
20503, you said?
How's that for live? That's actual live because I thought I was prepared, and I'm not. That one's too small. This one's too small. Dang. That's one nice thing about working in a shop with a number of other repair people. You can always borrow their tools. if they got the right one. All right, we think we got it here. There we go, thank goodness. Okay, so I slipped the L-shaped socket on there, and I can now, I have to loosen the rod because it's too straight. So lefty or righty tighty, lefty loosey. So I am going to turn this nut an eighth of a turn here. Lefty loosey. You could hear it was fairly set right there, so it made a little bit of a noise there. And now I'm going to check the same way I did before. It has moved, but not enough. It's still too straight. So I'm going to go in and do the same thing here. And notice I'm doing this with the strings up to tension so that I can see live what's happening. There we go. Now I'm getting a little bit of space there. That's good. It's actually pretty good when I look all the way across. I don't know if you can see that. I'm also sighting down the neck from the peg head end, and it looks quite a bit better, nice and straight. Let me check this again here. Yep, that's what I want, that teeny little bit of relief. So now I got the neck where I want it. The next thing that I'm going to check is the nut slots. I'm going to do it in a similar fashion where I'm going to press the string down in between the first and second fret, or between the second and third fret. So the string is resting on the second fret. I'm going to observe that space between the top of the first fret and the bottom of the string there. And I want it to be even smaller than the first one, especially on the first string. I don't know if you can see that space there between the top of the fret and the first string. It's pretty small, but on a mandolin in particular, that first string nut slot, or the first set of strings there, can be very, very close to that first fret because of the high tension of that string, or that pair of strings. So I see that I want to cut that first fret now. I'm going to check with my calipers here the size of that string. Yeah, it's a 10 gauge string, and I have a 10 gauge nut slotting file from the Stuart McDonald Company. So I need to move that string out of the way so I can do so, and I usually have the fingernails on this hand just with a little bit of nail there, mostly for playing, but it is very handy for this where I can grab that string and just pull it out of the way. Now I can go in there, set my file in that slot, and do a little cutting to lower that down. A nice bone nut on this mandolin. One thing that I have to watch when I'm cutting here is this end. The slot has to be angled down toward the peg head. And if I angle it too much, it's easy to dig the end of that file into the peg head there. So let me get at this a little better here. Dropped it down nice. Okay, so I've got the first string a little bit lower than the second string. I'm going to lower that first string just a little bit more. And it will be, so as I go from the smallest and highest pitched string to the lowest pitched string, I want a little more space each time. I want the high E string, when I do this little test here with my finger between the second and third fret, I want it to be just like it is. Like there's the teeniest little space there that I can see. It is practically lying right on there where the second string still has a little bit of space there. For you mandolin players out there, I'm sure you've noticed it. Put a new set of strings on, and most of the time what I do is take my string winder and I wind each string till it has a certain tension feel to it. So it feels like, oh, it's got some tension to it, it's getting closer to pitch. And whenever I do that, just by feel, inevitably, the first, the high E string has the furthest to go to get to pitch. And of course, inevitably, if I were setting up 10 mandolins today, one after another, I would break a few high E strings. Just how it goes. The high E string is very tight. The difference between where it is at pitch and where it is when it's so tight it's going to break is not that much. So that's one of the reasons why we can lower that nut slot down very close to the fret, because it has a very high tension. It's stretched very, very tight, and it won't oscillate that much when you strike it, so that you can get it closer to that first fret and have it still play clean. And also, because it's so tight, it's a little harder to press down, so you need that little bit of extra there. There we go. Okay, so I've got them both about the same. So there's the first slot's set. Now the second slot, I want it to be, when I look at the D string, the third pair, and the G strings, the fourth pair, they look pretty good to me. There's a small amount of space there, but I want it to be a little bit higher than it was there. And I look at the A string, I want to take that down a little bit more. One thing that I need to be cautious about when I'm on a mandolin as opposed to a guitar, certainly you need to do this on a guitar, but it's more important on a mandolin, because there's those pairs of strings, there is this little bit of nut material in between each string. You got to be careful to file it, to have the file not waver like that or like that, because if you do and the file catches, it's easy to pop this little bit of nut material right out of there in between the slots. So it's the same for any double or string, any instrument with doubled strings, like a 12-string guitar or any of the mandolin family instruments. So you have to all right, so I just made a little maneuver there, though, that allows me to make sure that I'm going straight on and smooth. A lot of times, if you just use the file straight up and down, as I said, you will cut a slot or a nut slot that is shaped pretty much like that. One thing, and sometimes with a nut slot shaped like that, you will get the string to stick in the slot as you tune it. I'm sure everybody has heard this, where you're turning the string to tighten it up and you hear no change in pitch. You turn it again a little bit, you hear no change in pitch. You turn it again, it makes a ping noise, and it jumps quite a bit in pitch. That's because you're pulling the string through the nut and it's catching in that nut slot, and you're creating a fair amount of tension on the peg head side of the nut, but it's not moving the string because the string is caught in there. And so one thing you can do to alleviate that, instead of having a slot that has that shape, you can have this shape, where it is that sized up to the string right at the fingerboard and nut edge, but it opens up in a slight V shape towards the peg head, so that usually will help you to not catch so much. So I'm actually doing a little bit of that, where I'm creating that V shape, and I'm careful to stay away from the front edge. That allows it's still a little tight in there. The file is, so still a little tight. I think I need to open that slot up just a little bit to accept this file. There we go. Let's see how much we got there. That's good. It didn't need to come down as much as so the A string did not need to come down as much. I'm going to open this one up for that slight V shape too, because I know take it down just that little bit. That second one needs to come down just a little bit more, and I'll be where I need to be. Get that string back in the slot there. There we go. Nice even set of A strings, which are down right where they need to be. So I've got the neck with the proper amount of relief, the nut slots cut to the depth that they need to be. And now, last thing I'm going to do is to set the height of the bridge. And I'm going to determine the bridge height. It's an adjustable bridge on this mandolin. Two knurled nuts there that I can raise and lower the top of the bridge. I'm going to get my ruler out, increment with 30-second increments. I'm going to set it on the top of the 12th fret and observe that space between the top of the fret and the bottom of the string. On the high E string, I want it to be right around 2/30 seconds. And it's a little above that. When I set it on there, I want to cover the black line of 2/30 seconds with the string, so that the bottom of the string is sitting right on top of that black line. And so I can get in. Now, sometimes it can be a challenge, just like this. The pick guard is right up against that. I can barely get my fingers in there, and because I have the strings up to tension, it can be a little tight to turn. So I have to lower this side. Let's see what I got to do on this side. Actually, the G string is pretty close. I want it to be 5/64ths, 2.5 30 seconds, and so that has been the standard for our mandolin setups for quite a while. 2/30 seconds on the high E and 2.5 30 seconds on the low G string. We have been moving that standard down a little bit over time because players, the quality of mandolins has gone up, and players are looking for a mandolin that plays a little easier because there's a wider range of styles being played, and people need a little tighter, lower action so they can do some more challenging things up the fretboard, and so we have moved those standards down a little bit. It's a little hard to describe in 30 seconds, but I guess the way I look at it is just a little bit over 2/30 seconds on the low G and a little bit under on the high E. So for sure I have the low G pretty much where I want it. I just have to get the high E down to where I want it. And because it's supposed to be a thumb wheel there, and I couldn't get my thumbs in, so I got to detune the instrument a little bit so that I can. Boom. As I thought would happen, as I mentioned, I was detuning the strings and the high E string popped there because that will not be a bad thing to look at. I want to get that string out of the way here, so I'm going to take the tailpiece cover off and get that string out of the way. But that will allow me to move that a little away from the pick guard there, so I can get a nice grip on it with my fingers and just move it down a little bit. Now I have to move it back to where I had it there. I thought, in an effort to be prepared, I thought about grabbing an extra loop end string, which would have been a good idea. Maybe one of my fellow repairmen might have one handy. Oh, he's on it already. Steve is rescuing me here. He's looking for a loop end 10 is what I'm looking for. No promises. We have them for sure. But anyhow, I can start to tune up the other strings here, and so I can, while we're looking to get a string here, I can get the rest of these back to pitch and make sure that I have my. Take that broken in here and get it out of the way. I can make sure I got the other strings tuned up.
Chris Fire, make that 810. Chris Fire, 810.
Should be. I don't have them quite to pitch yet, but I'm gonna see if I'm in the ballpark here. Looks pretty good from here. Sorry, Will. Let me see if I can get these back up to pitch. pretty good there. Get this guy back up.
Hey, Joe.
I'm indisposed right at the moment. If we can talk a little. I'm doing Facebook Live, and you are on Facebook
Oh,
Live.
hello, Facebook Live. My apologies, Joe. I will
All right.
let you go.
All right, thank you. Mm-hmm. Okay, we're pretty close there. And oh yeah. So I have what I want there. Just a little over 2 on the bass side and sort of a low 2, if you will, on the treble side. So I'm pretty happy with that. All I need is one more string and I'll be set up. Yeah, that's all right. Ah, there we go.
It's pretty ugly, but
It'll do. Let's whip this one on there. This is an old Vegas string with that fun little chenille, the green chenille. It'll do for demonstration purposes. And that's what I will probably put a newer string on there in a minute here before I call this new instrument setup complete. But
or anyone who knows, 810 Chris Fire, 810, please.
all right, make sure it's in the slot good. Okay, so I established my bridge position right off the bat. Now that I've got it set up, I want to check the intonation again. I'm going to check the 12th fret harmonic with the 12th fret note and try to match them up. Pretty good there, by ear. There we go. Mandolin setup. That's the basics. There's a lot of other things that can come into play while you're doing it, but that's what we got for you on Facebook Live today. Remember, next week, 1-year anniversary. Throw me some ideas. What do you want to hear? What do you want to do? We'd like to have a roundtable discussion with some topics that you come up with. So please send them in. Thanks for sticking with us, and remember, share and like us on Facebook, and we'll see you next week.